For generations, the American dream promised that ownership was the ultimate validation of a man's worth, a tangible shield against systemic obsolescence. Yet, in the twilight of the 1970s, that very dream became a psychological crucible for blue-collar workers, trapped beneath a collapsing economic ceiling. When Archie Bunker reaches for financial independence, he exposes a haunting paradox. How far will a patriarch go to save his pride when security shatters? This brings us directly to the fateful premiere of Season 8, an episode that masterfully shifts from traditional living room domesticity into a corporate tragedy. The catalyst arrives when Kelsey decides to sell his neighborhood tavern, ignited a spark of desperate ambition within Archie's long-repressed blue-collar soul. For over a decade, this tavern served not merely as a watering hole, but as Archie's sanctuary, a realm where his opinions held absolute authority. Consequently, the prospect of owning this establishment represents the ultimate elevation from a disposable dock foreman to a self-made master of his own destiny. Paradoxically, Archie's fierce drive for entrepreneurial success is heavily counterbalanced by his profound lack of financial literacy and economic institutional capital. The financial barrier is insurmountable through honest means, as the bank demands a level of collateral that the Bunker family simply does not possess. Therefore, the narrative forces Archie to confront his greatest vulnerability: the realization that his lifelong labor has accumulated nothing but systemic debt. This socio-economic desperation triggers a profound domestic conflict when Archie brings his ambitious, risky proposition back to the family safety net at Hauser Street. In a beautifully written sequence, Norman Lear juxtaposes Archie's volatile optimism against the grounded, protective caution of his devoted wife, Edith. To Edith, the house is not a fluid financial asset to be leveraged, but a sacred sanctuary protecting them from an unpredictable world. Her instinctive refusal to sign the mortgage papers represents a rare moment where the matriarch directly subverts Archie's long-established domestic dominance. Intimidated by her sudden defiance, Archie retreats into his signature bluster, utilizing comedic insults to mask a terrifying undercurrent of marital powerlessness. He mocks her intellect, yet this chauvinistic performance fails to dissolve the harsh reality that his entire entrepreneurial dream is completely deadlocked. This failure shifts the emotional landscape of the episode from traditional working-class sitcom humor into a tense psychological study of moral compromise. Driven to the absolute edge by his stubborn pride, Archie conceives a dangerous, desperate plan that violates the sanctity of his marriage. If the world refuses to grant him ownership through the front door, he decides to break through the systemic barriers via forgery. In the quiet stillness of the night, Archie commits a silent, unforgivable betrayal, signing Edith's name against her explicit, expressed will. This dark act highlights the profound tragedy of his character. Archie destroys the structural trust of his present to secure an imaginary future. The script, brilliant, uses this ethical transgression to expose how capitalism can warp traditional values, turning a proud husband into a common criminal. Consequently, when the banking institution accepts the fraudulent document, Archie experiences a hollow triumph that is structurally built upon shifting sands. Armed with the stolen capital, he returns to Kelsey's bar not as a patron, but as the conquering hero of his own narrative. In a beautifully orchestrated comedic beat, Archie celebrates his transition to ownership with a grandiosity that borders on theatrical delusion. He generously commands the room, basking in the shallow validation of his peers, entirely insulated from the moral consequences waiting at home. This superficial celebration highlights the intense irony of working-class camaraderie. They worship the title of boss, even when it is achieved through self-destruction. Meanwhile, back at 704 Hauser Street, the domestic space remains a ticking time bomb. Completely unaware of its sudden financial vulnerability, the domestic peace is maintained purely through Edith's ignorance, creating an intense, uncomfortable suspense that completely subverts the traditional sitcom formula. Norman Lear brilliantly forces the audience to occupy an uncomfortable dual awareness, laughing at Archie's pride while dreading the inevitable discovery. As the afternoon progresses, Archie's anxiety begins to break through his hollow bravado, proving that guilt is an uninvited guest at his celebration. Every congratulatory pat on the back functions as a subtle reminder of the profound dishonesty that secured his newly minted status. To maintain his illusion of absolute control, Archie double downs on his performance. Treating his friends with a condescending benevolence, he promises renovations and improvements, speaking with the grand vocabulary of a corporate tycoon rather than a local tavern owner. This comedic disconnect underscores a deeper sociological truth. The marginalized often mimic the behavior of their oppressors once they attain power. However, this fragile structure of deceit faces its ultimate test when Harry accidentally reveals a piece of information that threatens the secret. The structural tension reaches a fever pitch as Archie realizes that legal documentation cannot be easily hidden in a small, interconnected community. His internal panic turns his triumphant return home into a desperate race against time to intercept the bank's official confirmation letter. Upon entering 704 Hauser Street, the tone abruptly shifts from open comedy back to the claustrophobic reality of a suspense thriller. Every sound becomes amplified, and every innocent remark from Edith is perceived by Archie as a hidden accusation. Highlighting his paranoia, Edith notices his erratic behavior, yet her innate innocence prevents her from discovering the dark truth hidden beneath his defensive irritability. She questions his sudden exhaustion, to which Archie responds with an aggressive deflection, desperately trying to re-establish his patriarchal dominance. This emotional manipulation is deeply painful to witness, proving that Archie's financial ambition has begun to actively corrupt his moral character. As the final minutes of Part 1 tick away, the domestic tension solidifies into a powerful, lingering cliffhanger that leaves the audience breathless. Norman Lear brilliantly refuses to provide a comfortable resolution, choosing instead to leave his protagonist standing on a moral precipice. The tragic trajectory of the Bunker family is set, establishing a timeless blueprint for how a sitcom can explore socioeconomic desperation. If you appreciate these deep-dive, sophisticated analyses into the golden age of television storytelling, please consider subscribing to support our channel. Thank you for watching. And remember, even in the pursuit of the American dream, the heaviest price is always paid within these walls.